I know David has to leave here right at 1 o'clock, so we'll get started soon. A few quick things. Because of the great success I think we've had this semester, we're switching, as you saw in an email, to a weekly format next semester. We have most of the slots already filled, and you'll see that come up on the web pretty soon. I also mentioned we'll have a data blitz, just like this semester. Please ask me if you don't know what that is, or are just interested in presenting and need some extra encouragement. This is open to both grad students and postdocs to do a quick 5 to 7 minute few slides about their current work. And then I think Camille might say more at some point about us filming, but we're filming at least this presentation, and we'll try to do that regularly for next semester when at least speakers are okay with it, but we'll keep you posted on where that ends up and how you can access it later.
All right, so yeah, my name is Camille Morvan. I'm co-organizing the workshop with Amitai. So yeah, we're going to be filming every talk that, if the speakers are okay with it, and that's going to be online somewhere on the website or somewhere else. And so our speaker today is Professor David Laibson. He's a professor in the economics department here at Harvard. So David earned in master's from the London School of Economics in 1990, and then he received his PhD from MIT in '94. That's correct.
Roughly. I don't even know. I mean, if you tell me.
Well, yeah, I'm telling you. You have a very impressive CV. You should read it. And then he joined the faculty at Harvard in '94. So David teaches several really interesting classes. One of which is it's called Psychology and Economics. And I actually sat in this class and I found out that David is a great speaker. So as you will see very shortly, he's a very good speaker. David's research focuses on macroeconomics, intertemporal choices, behavioral economics, and neuroeconomics. His work has been published in prestigious journals such as the Quarterly Journal of Economics, American Economic Review, Econometrica, and Science. And today, David will tell us about work he conducted on time inconsistency and self-control problems. And his research offers innovative and creative solutions to self-control problems that he will tell us about right now. So please join me in welcoming David Laibson.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm thrilled to talk to an audience that I don't usually connect with, so I'm really looking forward to making this a dialogue and learning a lot from you. I unfortunately have to go when we're done immediately to the airport for another Harvard event, which is in New York City. So I apologize at the end. I'm just going to run. So I want to tell you today about work with John Beshears, James Choi, Bridget Madrian, and Jung-Suk Kung. A lot of Harvard connections here. John was an undergrad and a doctoral student here. James was an undergrad and a doctoral student here. Bridget was as a faculty member here, and Jung was an undergraduate here, and hopefully will be a doctoral student here soon. So this is about how we help people save for retirement, and you'll see that we're going to kind of look at that through a particular experimental lens that may or may not generalize to the real world. But let me begin with the real world and kind of motivate the topic by telling you about something that I'm very worried about, and I hope to get you interested in and also worried about. Let's think about a typical American household in a kind of good scenario for retirement saving. Let's assume, just to keep the analysis simple, that this household has a 6.5% guaranteed rate of return in their 401k account, or in their 403b account if it's a university. Let's assume a 2% rate of inflation. Let's assume that they're contributing 6% of their salary into this retirement savings account. 401k, of course, is the principal way that Americans and increasingly the rest of the world saves for retirement. Let's assume 100% employer match, so every dollar the employee puts in, the employer puts in a dollar. Let's assume that there's no leakage from these accounts, meaning the money that goes in stays in until they retire. Let's assume that they start working at age 22, their first job pays 35 grand, they start saving right away, they have 1% real wage growth. Social Security, when they retire, replaces half of their salary, and there's a 4% spend down rule of their accumulated wealth in retirement. So put all that together, what does this household look like? And this is kind of the idealized US household. They end up retiring with 103% replacement ratio. In other words, if they retire with $100,000 of income, the day after they retire, they're able to consume $103,000 annually of income. Terrific. They did really well. This is what we're shooting for. They end up retiring with $719,000 of wealth. Now that's inflation adjusted, so that's current dollars. Pretty good, pretty impressive. and they've got their house, and they've got Social Security. So this is a terrific scenario. I wish I could report to you that this is what we're going to experience, at least what the typical American is going to experience. A lot of things I've assumed are realistic in some kind of idealized sense, but in practice, that's not the way the world appears to be functioning. Let's now make this more realistic. So the original scenario is here, 103% replacement ratio. Is it okay?
I can't reach it, something. These three chords.
Okay. Should I keep going, or should we call the police? Okay. Okay, great. No one died. It's good. So this is the original scenario. And it's like some reinforcement test. Let's now just make it more realistic. Believe it or not, right now these accounts are leaking at a phenomenal rate. The leakage rate is 3.5% of the account balances. And in fact, if you think it not about the leakage rate, but about the difference between inflows and outflows, for every dollar that flows into these accounts today, 50 cents flows out before retirement. So basically the outflows before retirement are about half as big as the inflows, which is pretty scary when you think about these as retirement savings accounts. With a 3.5% balance leakage, that takes the accumulation down from $719,000 for this household to $302,000. Let's also acknowledge that a lot of households don't have access to these retirement savings accounts in the U.S. Believe it or not, their employers don't offer these accounts. That takes it down, in some average sense, to $198,000. The match rate is not dollar for dollar on these accounts, but it's 50 cents on the dollar. The net return is probably not 6.5% risk-adjusted guaranteed, probably closer to 5.5% risk-adjusted guaranteed. About 20% of the households that have access to these retirement savings accounts don't even participate. They don't want it, they opt out, whatever. People don't start saving at 22, they start saving at 30. And Social Security is going to get scaled back because we can't afford to pay what we've been promising. At the end of the day, we're going to be paying probably a lower replacement rate. Add this all together, and a realistic scenario for a kind of typical American household is $87,000 of financial wealth that they've accumulated when they reach retirement. $87,000. This is not like the bottom, decile. This is a median. And a replacement ratio of 51%, meaning if they retire earning the year before they retired $100 or $100,000, then when they retire, they can only afford a lifestyle of $51,000 a year. Now, am I crazy? Is this kind of a ridiculous discussion? What have I done to magically distort the analysis? Probably not that much. Here's the number that this quick simulation generates, and here's the actual data. In 2007, before the financial crisis, the median household retired with $68,000 of financial wealth. That's all they got. Now, the big piece that I wanted to highlight was this leakage. We went from $719,000 to $302,000 just by introducing leakage out of these accounts. People save, and then the money comes out prematurely. Put that in quotes. It leaks for many reasons. But it leaks so that it's not available when they retire. Now, what's the anti-leakage strategy in the U.S. in our retirement savings accounts? We have a 10% penalty for early withdrawals. Basically, if you take it out early, we're going to make you pay a penalty as a way of disincenting those early withdrawals. We do allow loans without penalty, but if you don't repay the loan, then you pay a penalty. And there are some special categories for penalty-free withdrawals. Now, let me ask you, and this is a huge problem. We're talking about the retirement savings of 300 million Americans, let alone another 6 billion people the world over. Is the strategy we've been developing, this 10% penalty, a good idea? Well, more generally, let's ask the question, how much liquidity and of what type should one have in a retirement savings system? The classical economic answer is liquidity raises welfare. Give households more freedom, more choice. you make them better off. But I think everyone in this room must immediately appreciate that people aren't necessarily these perfect optimizers with perfect self-control. In fact, liquidity is a two-edged sword. If I give you more liquidity, sure, that gives you more freedom, that gives you more flexibility to handle shocks, but it also might really hurt you if the money keeps leaking out for the wrong reasons. Now, there's a big literature rapidly growing, this is just a smattering of the papers, on the problems of self-control and temptation and our tendency to spend more than we think we should spend. So I'm going to build on this literature, in particular this paper here by Ashraf, Carlin, and Yin, and ask, can we build a different kind of savings account? One that people can use to resist temptation. A savings account that enables people to kind of lock away their money from themselves, not because an external agent, the government, forces them to do that, but because the individual themselves says, I'm better off when you limit my temptation. Now, there's already some kind of practical movements in this direction. There's a website which I encourage you to look at called Stick, designed by behavioral economists. I mean, this didn't come out of thin air. They're motivated by things like present bias, and they're trying to build an environment in which people can tie their own hands. There's also a few commercial products, or let's call them consumer goods. Here's Clocky, designed down the river at MIT, and as you might guess, looking at it, when the alarm goes off, Clocky, believe it or not, jumps off the table and starts running around the room, beeping the whole while, until you get out of bed, find Clocky, turn it off, and then presumably you're too much awake and angry to get back into bed and fall asleep. There are other products. Here's a money-chewing alarm clock. If you haven't pressed the snooze button at the appointed hour, the $100 bill feeds through the alarm clock and gets shredded. And you can see here there's a $100 bill going through now and another $100 bill awaiting destruction if, I guess, you sleep a little bit longer still. Here's another product, which you can guess what's wrong with this product, of course. As students of US law, you can't destroy currency. That's right, exactly. No. So they invented another product called Snooze and Lose, which is another commitment device. But in this case, if you don't get up in time, money is donated to your favorite anti-charity, in this case, the GOP. $11 pending. Now, having said all that, I've led you astray, because Clocky is real, and these products, you can find them on the web, but they're April Fool's jokes. So, Clocky real, money destroying alarm clock false. Snooze and Lose also a made-up product. But you get the idea. So what are we doing in this paper? We want to find out what the features are that make commitment contracts attractive to people. I'm going to show you two studies, an original study and then a replication and extension, and we'll basically show you that what we found, the kind of surprising results in the original study, replicate in the follow-up, and we're able to kind of go a little bit further. Okay, so here's the basic design. We asked subjects who are representative sample of the US population, not students, to take $100 of money that we're giving them. In fact, I'll show you there are different amounts of money, but for now think $100, and allocate that money across two accounts. Real money. They're allocating the money across a liquid account where they can withdraw the money at any point, complete freedom, just like any old checking account, except this liquid account offers a 22% rate of interest. We picked a high number because we wanted people to think of this as a good deal and not simply as money that we're going to withdraw immediately and repay their credit card bill. That's the first account they can allocate money to. The other account they can allocate money to, and again, any combination is allowed here, all, or a mix. The other account is called the goal account, and the goal account says, subject pick a goal date. Before the goal date, the account will be illiquid in a way that I'll describe in a second. We're going to vary the nature of the illiquidity. And then after the goal date, it'll be liquid, just like the freedom account. And this account offers an X% rate of interest. And we're going to sometimes make this the same as this and sometimes vary the two interest rates. Now, what do I mean by illiquid? Well, there are three cases that we're going to study We're going to first study the kind of normal 401k IRA case, where illiquidity means if you withdraw this money before your own self-appointed goal date, you pay a 10% penalty. The second case is a 20% withdrawal penalty, where if you withdraw the money before the goal date, you pay a 20% penalty. And the third case is complete illiquidity. If you withdraw the money before the goal date, too bad, you're out of luck, you can't have it, period. I mean, sorry, you can't withdraw the money before the goal date. You're not allowed to have it. You're cut off. So questions about that. Is the design so far clear? I'm going to go through more details, but are these three types of illiquidity clear? And by the way, I'm an economist, and economists are used to and encourage interruption. So don't play nice, ask questions, and I'll slow you down if we're running out of time. So this is the way I like to present it, because we're going to keep coming back to this kind of 2x2 framework. We're going to be varying the nature of the illiquidity. It'll sometimes be a 10% penalty, sometimes a 20% penalty, and sometimes no withdrawal allowed. And we'll be varying the interest rate on the goal account. Sometimes it'll be low relative to the freedom account, sometimes the same as the freedom account, and sometimes higher than the freedom account. So the goal account is going to be varied a lot. We're going to study these 7 different versions of the goal account, but we'll always keep the freedom account the same, and this will be a between subject design. So every subject will make a choice between the freedom account and one of these 7 goal accounts. Here's the basic structure in terms of the details of the experimental timing. 495 subjects are recruited for this study from the American Life Panel. They're assigned to one of the 7 study arms, so they're going to be given one of these 7 goal accounts as the alternative to the freedom account. They'll read the rules. They'll make allocations of an endowment, and they don't know yet what their endowment will be, so they'll allocate in the case that it's $50 endowment, or $100 endowment, or $500 endowment, money coming from us. We then randomize, after they make their choices, which of the endowments they get, and then the kind of bank structure starts. The money is in the accounts, and they can make withdrawals or not, depending upon their choices. So here's how we communicate with our subjects. We say the freedom account, and by the way, we're intentionally leading the witness here. There are demand effects here. We want to kind of put them in an environment where there's a real kind of explanation emerging for why these 2 accounts are both appealing. What is the freedom account? It is designed to let you access your money whenever you want it. You can withdraw money from this account anytime over the next year, starting 1 week from today. Great. I understand why that's good. What is the goal account? The goal account is designed to help you save. You can withdraw money from this account anytime after a goal date that you pick. Setting a goal date for yourself and picking the right goal date can help you avoid the temptation to spend your money too soon. So we've kind of given them a narrative for why these accounts are appealing. Now, to an economist, this is a no-brainer. There's no excuse for putting any money in the goal account unless the interest rate for the goal account is above the interest rate for the freedom account. But we're going to see that the economic logic does not hold sway with these subjects. Okay, so the experimental variables, again, to review. The goal account's going to have 3 different interest rates depending upon the arm of the study. There'll be different kinds of deterrents for withdrawing the money from the goal account before your goal date, 10% penalty, 20% penalty, no withdrawal allowed, and then the amount to be allocated will vary across these 3 amounts. So let me ask you, just intuit this for a moment. Suppose you were in the condition where the goal account had a 22% rate of interest, and let's say 20% penalty. Who would put any money into the goal account? Same rate of interest as the freedom account, so there's no interest benefit. It's got a 20% penalty for early withdrawal. Economic logic says don't put a penny into the goal account. So who would put at least a penny into the goal account? Okay, so like 6 of you. So I kind of had intuition like that as well until I saw this data. So here's the structure. Let's take a look at what we find. Oh, sorry, here, and then this is the banking system that comes in at the end, once they've made their choices. So they have a freedom account, they have a goal account, they can make withdrawals. So the first thing I want to tell you about is the goal share. So we're going to take the amount allocated to the goal account and divide it by the total amount in their budget set, which is the endowment. So if the endowment's 100 and they allocate 30 to the goal account, goal share would be 30%. So first, let's look at the $50 condition. So this is the condition in which subjects were told, make a decision in case you're endowed with $50 from us. So first focus here. When there's a 10% penalty in the goal account, and the goal account even has a below freedom account interest rate. So the freedom account's offering a 22% rate of interest. Goal account's offering a 21% rate of interest. Lower interest and penalty for early withdrawal. 27% of the money ends up in the goal account. Now let's go to the 22% case, where the two accounts are equally generous on the interest rate. When there's a 10% penalty, we get 35% of the money going into the goal account. And as we increase the penalty on the goal account between subject, the allocation to the goal account goes up from 35% to 43%. And when we make it completely illiquid, so you can't have your money no matter what, now 56% of the money goes into the goal account. Now let me remind you, this is the way we structure the U.S. retirement savings system. Now when we increase the interest rate even more, some additional kick in some of these cases, but not down here. So now we're getting 57% of the money going into the goal account. 57%, 58%. Obviously, these numbers in green are all statistically indistinguishable. Now, I just showed you the case for the $50 condition. It turns out, we were surprised by this, whether it's $50 or whether it's $100 or $500, it all looks the same. They didn't make meaningfully different decisions, or at least given our sample of 500 subjects, we couldn't distinguish their decisions. So if these numbers looked almost like the ones you just saw, that's right. Same pattern. 28% in the case of a 10% penalty and a lower interest rate, and then a rising profile here in the 22% arms, and then higher numbers here, but these two numbers are again indistinguishable. Lisa?
David, you said the endowment was a hypothetical one, right? So they would be lotteried into
one of the three.
One of the three. I'm thinking about, I think you might be an author on this work too, Katie Milkman's work on want should choices. And this very much sounds like it's in the branch of contemplating should, especially because it's temporally far, not concrete. Do you think that this would apply, that this effect would hold if you gave the actual endowment of here's $50 or here's $100?
Well, that's the replication. We're going to get there. So you're going to see that it does hold. So in this case, I don't think it's so abstract because they're told you're going to get one of these three. We just haven't told you which one you're going to get. So they are getting one of the three. They just aren't getting it. They haven't been told which one it is yet. It will be revealed in 3 minutes. But in the second replication study, we just said they're getting this period from the start, and you'll see that the results are very similar. Okay, now here's another way to think about the data. I asked earlier, what fraction of you would put even a penny into the goal account, given that it seems dominated? And I think 6 out of 50, or I don't know, 40 hands went up. Our subjects have a very different attitude. As you've seen, you know, roughly a third of the money goes into the goal account, or more. But in addition, the vast majority of our subjects put at least some money into the goal account. Here's how to see that. This is a cumulative distribution function with the commitment share or goal share on the horizontal axis. So the way you read this is each bump here is basically how much mass is entering at that particular goal share. So when you see the bump that's entering at the 0 goal share, you can basically determine what fraction of the population is putting nothing into the goal account. And you can see that, you know, in the case of a 23% interest rate, 10% are putting nothing into the goal account. In the case of a 22% interest rate, 30% are putting nothing into the goal account. And in the case of a 21% interest rate, 35% are putting nothing into the goal account. Which means that the rest of the population, roughly 2/3 or more, is putting at least something into the goal account. You can also see that this is not a case of kind of everyone glomming on to one particular allocation. There's a kind of, you know, there's bumps here, of course, and there's a bump at 50, as you would expect, 50-50. But there's a pretty smooth progression from down here to up there, which means that our subjects are are kind of, struggling with this and ending up at different levels of allocation to the goal account. Just noticed a shelf full of alcohol. That's kind of a very odd and pleasing feature of this room. To think about that for our seminar room. So, okay. Okay, now, some of you probably are wondering whether I'm hiding a card up my sleeve, which is, sure, money goes into the goal account, but money might go into the goal account with kind of minimal commitment. Maybe subjects are just trying to make me happy, putting money in the goal account because they kind of know that that's interesting to us researchers, some demand effect, and then giving themselves really limited goal dates. Like, I commit myself for 4 days. Well, that's not what they do. And I can see that by calculating not the fraction of money that goes into the goal account, but the average commitment horizon for our subjects, counting the money in the freedom account as having a commitment horizon of 0, and counting the money, so G is the goal share. So 1 minus the goal share is the allocation to the freedom account, and that has a commitment horizon of 0 days. They're not locking themselves up at all. And the money in the goal account has a commitment horizon of D days, where D is the self-imposed goal date they set for themselves. So if they set D of 4 days, their commitment horizon is negligible. So as an example, if they put $10 in the freedom account and $90 in the goal account, but the goal date is only 10 days away, their commitment horizon is on average 9 days. Well, what are the actual commitment horizons our subjects choose? Well, in the 10% penalty case with a 21% interest rate on the goal account, they lock up themselves for 64 days. That's again this weighted average of the freedom account and the goal account. Weighted average 64 days. In the 22% arms, the average goal, what am I calling this? The average commitment horizon is 82 days, 101 days, 132 days. The same pattern we saw before of rising willingness to tie your own hands as the illiquidity becomes harder, as the penalties become bigger, and ultimately as there's no liquidity whatsoever. And the same kind of flat pattern in the 23% arms. Now, we didn't quite know what to make of this. It's, for an economist, both exciting and kind of scary because, well, practically speaking, we've built a retirement savings system that looks like this, and that seems to be kind of the worst of the worst option available here. Also, as an economist, it's kind of odd that people seem to be glomming onto limited freedom. So we wanted to make sure that this was not some screwy result, and so we ran a replication study, and we also wanted to begin to explore what the mechanisms were. So in the follow-up experiment, we again gave subjects an endowment, but now, as Lisa suggested, we gave them a fixed endowment. Rather than varying the endowment randomly across subjects and asking them to choose 3 times, we said, look, we know that they're going to choose the same thing for all 3 cases, so why not just give them a single endowment and let it go at that? So every subject gets a $100 endowment. And we're going to this time fix the interest rate at 22%. That's kind of the most interesting case, to kind of focus not on responses to interest rates, but instead responses to illiquidity, which is the kind of striking, odd aspect of this study. And we introduced 2 arms in the new study that replicate our old arms. So we have a 10% penalty before the goal date in arm 1, a no withdrawal arm, and then, because we wanted to understand choice in more complex settings that better replicate the real world, what would happen if we let subjects have an arms race between a 10% penalty goal account and a no withdrawal goal account? Now remember, that means there are 3 accounts available to them in this third arm. There's the freedom account and 2 commitment accounts. So now it's like the real world where you're not just making binary choices, you're making, multiple option choices. Of course, in the real world, it isn't 3 options, it's 3,000, but we're slow progress. And then a safety valve case, which was my brainchild. I'm very proud of this case. No withdrawal before the goal date, but then we thought we'd use a kind of judo on them and say, except in the case of a financial emergency as determined by the subject. So we thought, but if you really need the money, you can have it. Just tell us that you really need it and you can have it. And I thought, as you'll see quite incorrectly, that this would be very appealing to people. That they'd like the idea of, you can have access, but if you really need it, you can have access. I was dead wrong about that. Maybe someone in this, maybe it takes an economist to make a mistake like that. Is it obvious to all of you that this was that ARM 4 was a bad idea? It was obvious. Why was it obvious?
Obvious because when someone wants the money, they're going to get it.
They're going to get it.
It's
They're going to
no
lie.
penalty whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
No constraint whatsoever.
Okay, so let's take a look. And by the way, what do you think happened? What are the what are the intuitions among the psychologists when you enrich it and give them two? Remember, everything else was between subject before, right? So this is kind of the first within subject horse race. You give subjects a choice between a 10% penalty and a no withdrawal account. No withdrawal. Okay, you're right. Big time. Okay, so here's how we presented it. The goal account so the interesting one is ARM 3 because this is kind of unlike anything we've done before. Let me start with that. We say there are two types of goal accounts. There's one goal account where you can pay a 10% penalty, and there's another goal account where you cannot have access to your money. And then when we did the safety valve description, which again was my brainchild and a terrible failure, we said you cannot withdraw from this account before the goal date, except in the case of a financial emergency. If you have a financial emergency, you can make an early withdrawal. We are relying on you to be honest in judging whether you have a financial emergency. Was there a better way to say it? This didn't work. Okay, so here's what we found. In the 10% penalty case, this is now a $100 base. So they ended up putting 46% of the money into the goal account, even though it has a penalty relative to the freedom account. So again, we have this, bizarre, people want to tie their own hands. In the no withdrawal case, we saw 54% of the money going into the goal account. So again, a gap in favor of more illiquidity. When we had the two goal accounts, again, now the individual has a freedom account and two goal accounts to choose among, three options. On average, $50 goes into the goal accounts together, which interestingly is less than when they had only one option. You see the tension here? You increase the number of options and you don't increase contributions. But among the money that was contributed, it's an overwhelming win for the no withdrawal account. The no withdrawal account is a 2-to-1 winner in this contest. And then the safety valve is the very bottom of the pile, though of course you couldn't statistically distinguish these two cases with $45. Okay. Now we can also look at dollar-weighted days to goal date, and we see a similar pattern emerging. This is again to what extent are people committing themselves, tying their own hands. By the way, I should have told you, when I showed you the dollar-weighted days to goal date over here, you might have wondered what's the longest duration. You should have asked me. You were wondering that. This is a 1-year experiment. So if they had tied up every single dollar and tied their hands for the maximal period, these would have all been 365. And if they put all the money in the freedom account, these would have all been 0. So that's the range of possibility. Since they're basically committing to a particular date, like a holiday, Christmas, or a birthday, or a vacation, it's not surprising that they're kind of committing to some intermediate period. This is not retirement savings. This is an event-focused savings account. Okay, so what do we see when we look at the goal dates here? Now we basically didn't have a 365-day experiment. We were getting tired of experiments that involved monitoring for a year. We ran this out for about 8 months. So you see shorter dates here, but the same pattern of least commitment here and here. Here again, the safety valve is the big loser. And then as you go from 10% withdrawal penalty to no withdrawal, a step up in willingness to tie one's own hands. And here you see the two goal accounts, and again, a kind of reduction in tying one's own hands a little bit. Okay. So, let me kind of wrap this up and we'll have some time for Q&A. There's a lot of ways to parse this study, both in terms of kind of foundational primitives of human psychology and also in terms of policy. Let me begin with the kind of foundational human psychology bits. There's a lot of evidence here that people not only have self-control problems, but they know they have self-control problems. And in fact, though I've skipped it, the models that we economists tend to use, models like present bias, predict exactly the patterns that I showed you before. They predict that agents, if they understand their own propensity towards present bias, they understand their own propensity to succumb to temptation, then those agents will, in fact, show precisely the pattern, too many slides, of rising allocation to the goal account as the goal account becomes more and more illiquid. Which of course raises the question of why did a congressional intern in 1975, when they first dreamed up IRAs for executives, then no one ever imagined it would be the mass market product for retirement savings, why they ended up with this rule when this rule, in theory, and in this evidence, would have been better. So one big question for economists, and I guess psychologists too, is are people not only prone to temptation, but are they sufficiently aware of that propensity that they are willing to tie their own hands in these counterintuitive ways, willing to basically put more money into accounts the more illiquid those accounts become. And we see that they put more money into the illiquid goal account, even though it offers a lower interest rate. That's the 21% interest rate arm. They put more money into the goal account, even though it offers when it offers the same interest rate, but has illiquidity. They set goal dates far in the future. They prefer more liquid accounts to less illiquid accounts, which rules out demand effects. Remember, this is a between-subject design. So the subjects in the 10% arm don't see the subjects in the no-withdrawal arm. And the fact that the subjects in the no-withdrawal arm are more prone to use the illiquid commitment accounts cannot be explained by a demand effect, because the demand effect is in parallel across these two between-subject arms. And then, very importantly, when we do a kind of horse race with both accounts available to the same subject, they like the no-withdrawal accounts more than they like the 10% penalty accounts. Now, there's a lot of open questions here that I guess might worry economists more than psychologists, but again, we'll see what you're upset about. First of all, this is house money, right? So it's not their money, it's our money that we gave them. I think you can recreate a house money effect in the real world by having people allocate money before they receive it. So in other words, I'd say you're going to have a paycheck. I'm not asking you to take money out of your bank account and give it to me in your savings account. I'm asking you to pre-designate contributions to your savings account before the paycheck arrives in your checking account. That's the way all retirement savings is done. So I think, to a certain extent, the house money effect may be more relevant even in the real world when we talk about realistic retirement saving systems. Of course, there's a lot of demand effects. The stakes are low. I'm only passing out $500 maximum. These are short-run savings plans, not long-run savings plans. Maybe people are willing to do this when they're saving for their vacation in July, but they're not willing to do the saving for retirement 30 years away. There's an interesting trust issue. Usually in experiments, the trust issue goes against the experimenter, but in this particular experiment, the trust issue is in our favor. Why? Because we were using something called the American Life Panel, where the participants, the respondents, have been interacting with that panel, that longitudinal survey, for years. And they've really come to trust the researchers at the Rand Institute. It's not Ayn Rand, by the way, just in case you're curious. Different Rand. It's basically a think tank for economists out in Los Angeles. They've come to trust them. So in fact, we had high trust in this environment. Maybe we have more trust here than Harvard employees feel towards their pension plan. I don't know. We had very simple menus. Maybe in the real world with complicated menus it doesn't work this way. And it's not quite clear. Our theory tells us that what we found is what we should have expected, that increasing penalties, reaching the ultimate level of no withdrawal should have produced rising allocation to the commitment account. That's the consequence of the temptation models that economists work with, again, present bias. But maybe there's something else going on here where people somehow don't like penalties, and that's another ingredient in all of this. But remember, their willingness to allocate money to the commitment account went up as we went from the 10% penalty to the 20% penalty. So it doesn't look like a penalty aversion is explaining the effects. But I remain, agnostic about that. Okay, so evidence that this paper has evidence that individuals recognize future self-control problems and adopt commitment devices. And I think it has interesting implications for the way that we have designed the retirement savings system in the US. I don't think we know now that we should go out and recreate IRAs and 401ks, but I think it at least raises the question, what the hell are we doing with the system that, at least in this evidence, is the least effective? Now, as we think about that, let me offer you an example and then a challenge. The example first. Right now, in the world of 401ks, we have a one-size-fits-all policy. In other words, when you go out and invest in a 401k or an IRA, you only have one vehicle with one set of rules to invest in. It's all the same rules for 401ks and IRAs, basically. But you have 400 flavors of ice cream to choose among, and 300 flavors of coffee, etc. So why are we offering the world a single vehicle for retirement savings when there's so much more at stake in retirement savings than there is in the choice of ice cream, at least in my view? Why don't we offer people some choice? And with that in mind, let me just set a baseline example of a 401k system where instead of offering a single account with a 10% penalty for early withdrawal, we offer two accounts. One account is the traditional account that already exists, and the second account is a 401k, which is a lockbox. You put the money in, and you can't have it back until you retire or become disabled. Now, I'm not in any way restricting people's opportunity sets. I'm just creating a second account that's a lockbox account, and then we can all ask the question, what happens? Do people use it, or does it get totally ignored? I think many people would use it, but I'd like to find out. And then the challenge to you is, given how important retirement savings is, and given how much you, behavioral scientists, know about temptation and self-control problems, I want to challenge you to come up with a better retirement savings system. I can't believe that we're spending time designing new kinds of toothpaste or a better, flavor of Campbell's soup, which is a modest market, when we've got $10 trillion in retirement savings accounts in the US, let alone many tens of trillions of dollars in retirement savings accounts the world over. And no one has sat down and tried to build a retirement savings account that addresses one of the key issues, the temptation to spend the money prematurely. And presumably, once we address that issue, we will drastically reduce the leakage problem that I told you about at the beginning of the talk. So, I think I've got 10 minutes left for questions. We're ready to go. Yeah.
How successful were each of the different penalty accounts in actually deterring people from taking their money out, since that's become a third?
So that analysis is getting looked at right now, but it looks like it goes the way that you're suggesting, which is, when you have more flexibility, people take more money out, and when you have no withdrawal, people take less money out. And so you see the kind of net accumulation going down, the more flexibility you give, the net wealth holding going down, the more flexibility you give people. Yeah?
You've been talking about the leakage problem as if it's sort of always a problem, right? I mean, I can imagine a very clear answer to your question for why they didn't design the original system with a no withdrawal option, because a no withdrawal option is actually really bad if you do have financial emergencies, right? So maybe people are really bad at saying, I'm only going to withdraw this when I have a financial emergency, but that doesn't mean that those situations don't actually happen, right?
So I agree completely. So it's for that reason. So the question basically points out, let's be clear, money saved for retirement should occasionally be spent prematurely if a shock hits the household. And perhaps even some of this money is not being saved for retirement. Maybe people intentionally put it into these accounts knowing they're going to probably spend it prematurely. Which is why I would propose that we keep the 10% penalty account in the system, but add a second account with a no withdrawal option. Sorry, with a no withdrawal rule, so that those people who want to tie their hands can use the no withdrawal account, and those who want maximal flexibility can use the 10% penalty account, which is the status quo account. And I think most people will say, look, neither extreme is right for me, I'm going to mix it up. I'd like to find out what happens in that world. And if it turns out, which your question suggests might happen, that some people use the no withdrawal account, but subsequently feel as though they got tricked or messed up, and there's a lot of people in that category, then we terminate the system. But we should study it, because right now we've gone to one extreme. So I guess I'll just, fly around the room. Yeah. Yes, you.
Sorry. It seems like implicit in what some of the stuff you're saying here is that some people have temptation and come out, and some people maybe don't. Have you looked at any individual differences here? Do you think that would predict sort of who's putting money where, and maybe there's certain people who are going to be helped by one account versus another account?
So I think individual differences are very important. I think that they're subtle, because I would nominate myself for having terrible self-control problems, and yet, how did I get a PhD? Got a PhD because of deadlines. That's it. So it's not obvious who is in which category, but what we do find, and I'll put a little cold water on this in a second, but what we do find is that the people who are carrying large credit card debts and rolling over those debts month to month, so they're paying a lot of interest to the credit card company for carrying debt at high interest, are most prone to use the commitment accounts, which kind of matches up with, I think, the flavor of your question. That said, that was an ex post analysis. So we didn't, when we pre-specified what we were going to do in our own minds, we didn't say we're going to check that and look for that hypothesis. So any kind of ex post analysis like that, I don't find very credible because of the multiple testing problem. But there it is. Yes?
I was wondering if you're familiar with the literature in psychology on counteractive self-control by Laibson. At the University of Chicago, she develops these ideas about counteractive self-control strategies that you can use to not succumb to temptation, like missing a really important medical appointment, or something that's really painful but it's really important to you. There's so she does talk about penalties, like monetary penalties, but there may be other strategies that you can use in this really interesting kind of economic context. I don't remember all the details, but in that literature, at least, they do talk about individual differences, like people who really value that goal or that, like saving for retirement, they should pursue something else. Do that more, allocate more money into the goal rather than the freedom fund, and we should find certain differences like that. So I would assume that people who have more of a goal, or maybe people who are older, for instance, versus younger, who value saving for retirement more, there would be differences there. How much they allocate.
Well, I would. So first of all, thank you for that reference. I'm gonna counteractive self-control. I don't know about that. It sounds like it's right up my alley. I will read that. That's really why I'm here, most importantly, to learn about stuff like that. So differences of the sort that you mentioned at the end, like older people care more about saving for retirement than teenagers or 24-year-olds. That's a different kind of individual difference that I totally embrace. Clearly, all of our economic theories say that if you're a 32-year-old household with low income and 3 babies to feed, of course you shouldn't save for retirement. So I take that for granted. But I took this question to be about individual differences in the capacity for executive function and self-regulation, which sounds like it's also pertinent in the literature that you're referencing. But I think that's the more controversial and open-ended question than individual differences in need for saving or propensity to save, where I think we all would agree on that stuff. Like another example would be if you're a high-income household, you've got to save a lot because Social Security doesn't replace a lot of your income. Whereas if you're a low-income household, you can do no saving, very low-income household, because the Social Security replacement rate is 75% for people at the very bottom of the income ladder. So those kinds of individual differences, sure. Yeah.
cover whatever the variable is, whether it's self-control or delaying gratification or whatever it is. You could, for a policy intervention, do you think it would be useful to give people kind of quick, everyday, maybe tasks like that the research has shown will predict what they would do if they did save or did not save? So like give them a kind of commonsensical cognitive reflection task, and then say, oh, you answered this way, it shows that you would like this account more than the other. So kind of, and then give them the chance to decide whether they want to take that seriously or not.
So if we had that task and people didn't game it, sure. But I'm 45 years old, I've spent 25 years looking for that task to give to adults. Gotta say that everything I've measured has an R-squared. They all correlate significantly, right? So it's not about the t-stat. You know, with a big enough sample, you get the t-stat. But the R-squared, the predictive power of those tasks is vanishingly small. So we're talking about R-squareds of like 1%. So if you have a task, and I would hate to give someone a task and say, by the way, this is predictive. You just got this outcome. Boy, you have a self-control problem. And then in fine print it says, by the way, this has a 1% R-squared. So I don't think we have a task. And by the way, I've tried to do some genomics work. Doesn't work. You know, it will eventually, but it's small effects problems. You know, the genome is millions of SNPs, all small effects. So I don't think we currently have a technology for predicting in a meaningful way, meaning R-squareds of 20, 30, 40%, what your self-control future looks like. Okay, I can take 2 more questions, and then I'm sorry, I have to run, going to New York to raise money for Harvard. If I don't get there, you're all screwed. I am. Yeah. So who's, okay, that's right. I promised to go around, so who's, okay, yeah.
So I guess I was interested in that. I wonder about, what do you think about the interaction though between kind of this kind of self-controllability and also differences in income or education? Because it seems like it's also the interaction between those 2 sets of individual differences that will lead to different outcomes, and not just one or the other. It's kind of like nature and nurture. It's not one or the other. It's probably both together. In this case, it seems like context and biological propensity will both matter. And so, what do you think about those interactions and how they play out?
That's the, you know, these are the $1 million questions that you 2 are asking. Yeah, absolutely. It's nature, it's nurture, and it's the interaction. It's incredibly complicated. We're just beginning to pick at that set of questions, and at the moment, we know a lot about environmental manipulations that influence savings powerfully. Automatic enrollment would be a great example. If I automatically enroll you in a savings plan, you stay and you save. And if I don't automatically enroll you in a savings plan, you don't save. So we have very powerful environmental levers that we know how to pull that explain savings variation. But we know very, very little about the biology of self-regulation. I mean, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, sure, I'd love to give that talk in the future, but you know, we don't really know how to manipulate it. We can turn it off. We can use transcranial magnetic stimulation to make you into a, you know, impulsive. I don't know what. I'll avoid using the word impulsive in your behavior without judging it. But you know, we don't really know how to make you have more self-regulation, how to upregulate self-regulation using a biological intervention. You know, we think, I guess that's ADD drugs that you might think about along those lines. Okay, so I apologize. I have to go and catch this flight, but I hope the 3 of us can have an email correspondence. And if anyone, you know, I'm an economist trying to be a better psychologist. Obviously, I have a lot to learn. So I very much welcome email feedback now, a month from now, a year from now. If something comes to mind, if there's a literature you say, oh yeah, Laibson, can't believe you didn't mention that. Let me know. And again, I apologize for running, but let's have these conversations next week.